Almost everybody comes into a therapy situation with some kind of internal conflict, with parts of themselves that are either disconnected or actually arguing. And one of the goals that we have in assisting somebody to self-study and make discoveries about themselves, discoveries about how they're organized, is these various parts will come into consciousness and their needs will come into consciousness. Some of the experiments, like taking over, will help someone to not only become aware of these internal voices and arguments sometimes, but also to resolve them in some way or embrace them. And quite often it's interesting that someone will come to a therapy situation and present one part, and yet the practitioner, the Hakomi therapist, can pick up that there's another part in the way. I remember a story about Ron talking about a fellow that came to see him with an issue about his weight. And he spent a few minutes telling Ron about all the problems he had, that he was overweight and how it affected his relationships and his life. And he really wanted Ron to help him figure out why he was overweight and overcome that. And Ron's famous way of contacting this fellow after he told him all about this need to solve his weight problem, Ron said, "So you like to eat, huh?" He wanted to contact the part that liked to eat, not the part that wanted to lose weight. That was the part that was in consciousness for the fellow. What was outside of consciousness was why he was eating so much. So contacting the parts that aren't obvious to the person helps to bring them into consciousness and to help them feel heard. And ultimately, the various parts that are in conflict or disconnected from each other will resolve and become part of the whole. And this is one of the things that happens in the integration phase in Hakomi. One of the principles of Hakomi that was identified early on in the 80s is this principle of mind-body holism. And more body-centered psychotherapies, which Hakomi was identified as, have realized that psychology really only works when the body, the embodied experience of the person, is also included in the process of therapy. Insight alone is not enough for change, but we know from neuroscience research now that experience changes the brain. And what do we mean by that? It's not the realization of an old belief or even the offering of a new idea, like you can be safe here. It's the embodied experience of the new idea, the new possibility, which will gradually begin to change the way our brain organizes our nervous system's reactions to life and the way we organize experience. So embodied experience is an integral part of Hakomi. And often we can see when the person is having a reaction to the offering of potential nourishment or beginning to have the missing experience, that it's an entire embodied experience. And we want to bring that to their attention. Part of the integration is not just having an experience, but is realizing we're having the experience. So it's not enough, for example, to just offer nourishing presence to somebody. We want them to notice that they're being nourished, that they're being listened to, for example. We could listen to somebody and practice deep listening with somebody, but if they don't notice they're being listened to, it doesn't change the brain. So we want the experience to be registered. We want it to be realized. And part of how we help somebody integrate an experience that they're starting to have, that's a new experience of nourishment, is to help them recognize how it inhabits their whole body. It's not just an idea. Their posture will change, the breathing will change, They may notice changes that happen, and we might reflect changes that happen. But I find that if somebody can spend 10 or 15 minutes at the end of a session actually staying in the embodied experience of the new nourishment, the new missing experience, then when they go away, they have that consciousness, and the experience might not last, but the doorways to it are in their conscious awareness. They know if they take a deep breath, or if they change the way their mouth is held, or if they move the shoulders differently, that that's part of a new pattern, and that embodied awareness brings change. In a Hakomi session, when I'm working with somebody, it doesn't matter how early on it is or at what point in the experimenting, if I begin to see a hint of the person's demeanor changing in a way that seems like it's moving toward the missing experience, I will reflect that and wait. I'll contact that. So your breathing's different now. And I wait. And in the pause, the person will turn their attention to that. And they may notice, and with my encouragement, probably will notice even more parts of what changes. It might only happen for a second or so, but eventually, as we get closer to realizing what the missing experience is, I'm watching for how something in the person's embodied demeanor shifts. It's often just for a second or two to begin with, but sometimes there's a really noticeable change in their posture, or in the erectness of their spine, or in the breathing, as I said, or the softening of some tension pattern that they haven't done on purpose. It happens because it goes along with even the beginning contemplation of a new possibility. And when I see that, I want the person to stay and realize that. And so if I can even contact something like, something's shifting, or you seem different now, or there's something changed about the way you are in your body. And then I wait. And sometimes when that happens, and there's still 15 minutes left in the session, it might be tempting for the therapist to think that they need to do something more. I think there's some research, and I can't quote it right here, that says that 15 minutes is the minimum for somebody to stay in a new embodied experience for brain change to happen. So wouldn't that be amazing if we could get to the place where the person actually has that shift, begins to have the missing experience as an embodied experience as well as an insight, and all we do is stabilize that for 15 minutes at the end of the session. Nothing more to do except to appreciate it, contact that, stay radically present, stay in loving presence to hold the container for that. And the person will signal when that's complete, almost inevitably with a big sigh. Then you know the integration for now is complete. That's the best way to complete a session, is to have that almost quiet integration time for at least 10 minutes. 15 minutes is ideal.